Hello everyone, and welcome to another lecture on Python 2 versus Python 3. In this lecture, we look at the raise statement and the xrange function. Let's start by looking at the raise statement. We know that we can raise our own exception by using the raise statement. Now let's see the differences in Python 2 versus Python 3 when it comes to the raise statement. So in Python 2, we can say something like this, raise, and then our exception, right? So this hasn't changed in Python 3. You can raise your own exception by using the same expression. So raise and then your exception. So it's the same in Python 3 also. And next, you'll see a difference when you want to raise your own exception with some form of custom message. So in that case, the syntax is a little bit different. Let's see what it looks like in Python 2 first. So you will say something like raise, you will put your exception here, exception, and then you have your message, right? You have your exception message. This is an exception message, for instance. So that will be in Python 2. This is in Python 2. So you can raise your own exception by providing your own form of custom exception message. Whereas if you are using Python 3, you will have to pass this statement or your exception message as a parameter to this exception. So this would look like this, raise, and you have your exception, our exception, and then we simply pass it as a parameter. This is an exception message, or this is a message. So that's what it would look like. It would look like in Python 3. You'll need to pass it as a parameter to your exception. Whereas in Python 2, your exception custom message is separated from your exception here by using a comma. Let's see one more difference. In Python 2, you can raise your exception with an exception message and no exception class. What do I mean by that? You can say something like this. You can say raise and then your message. This is an exception message. So this is completely fine in Python 2. You can raise your exception with no exception class. Okay? But in Python 3, this is no longer supported. You cannot use this. So there is no support for this kind of exception in Python 3. Great. Next, let's look at the xrange function. We know that we can use the range function to return a list of numbers. In Python 2, we can use this range function. For instance, if I say range and then pass 5, this will return a list of numbers. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can also use the xrange function in Python 2, and that will return an iterator, right? Xrange 5, it will return an iterator object. So those are our options in Python 2. Whereas in Python 3, we don't have the xrange function. We only have the range function, and that range function returns an iterator object in Python 3. So one difference is if I want to return an iterator object in Python 2, I will use the xrange function and then pass some number, let's say 6. So that will return an iterator in Python 2. Whereas in Python 3, I'll have to use the range function to get an iterator. Okay, that's one difference. The next difference is when we use the range function. So the range function exists in both Python 2 and Python 3. So in Python 2, this range function will give you a list of numbers, right? Whereas in Python 3, we don't know whether we want a list of numbers or an iterator object. So in this case, we'll have to pass the list function. So for Python, for instance, I can say list1 is equal to range up to, let's say, 8. So I would say this to get a list of numbers in Python 2. So this would be in Python 2. And then if I call my list1 object, I'll get a list of numbers 0 through 7. And to get a list of numbers in Python 3, we'll have to cast this method into a list to make sure that we get a list, because the range function in Python 3 does what the range and xrange functions do in Python 2. So to get a list of numbers in Python 3, we'll have to call the range function, and then we'll have to cast it to a list so that we are ensuring that we'll get a list. Then save that in some variable. So that will be the equivalence in Python 3. Great. Let's look at another example. We know that we can use the xrange function or the range function in list comprehensions, right? So if you have the xrange function in a list comprehension, you don't need to change the result to a list by casting it. So in case of list comprehensions, the range function will work very well without any need to cast it to a list. So let's see an example of list comprehension. As you remember, list comprehension, everything is enclosed in rectangular braces, and then you have a statement that looks like this. We can say x for x in x range 6. So this will be in Python 2, whereas in Python 3 it will be x for x in range 6, and you don't need to cast anything to a list. So the range function works very well with list comprehension. Similarly, another common use of the range function is in for loops. We know that we can say something like the following. I can say for x in range, let's say 4, we can say print x, and that will print out this number 0, 1, 2, 3. So this is in Python 2, and if you want to use the same thing in Python 3, there is no change, so you can use for loop the same way in Python 3 as well. Similarly, you can perform some functions on the range function as well. For instance, if I have a function range, let's say 14, I can find out, let's say I can apply some methods like minimum and then on my whole range function, and that will give me 0. Similarly, I can determine the maximum, say range 14, and that will be 13. And we can even use other methods or functions like the sum method and then pass range 14, and that will give us the sum of the numbers in range 14, right? These are some of the things that we can do on our range function. And there is no change in Python 3 as well. So you can do the same exact thing in Python 3. So there is no change in terms of that. Similarly, if I want to convert this object to another data type, for instance, if I want to change this range 14 to a tuple, for instance, I can say I can cast it to a tuple object. We can do that, and sorry, let me add tuple here. So we can do that. And if I want to change this to a set, we can do as well, set, and then pass your range function. So these things haven't changed in Python 3. You can use the same exact thing in Python 3. Great. We'll continue our discussion on the differences in Python 2 and Python 3 in the coming lecture. Thank you, everyone.